Hi everybody, this is Archit and welcome to another episode of WazirX Conversations. Now, India has emerged as a powerhouse in the world economy with its large population, rapid expansion and investment in innovation. Now, in today's conversation, I have with me two gentlemen who are extremely passionate about India and innovations in the fintech world. Meet Raoul Pal and Siddharth Menon. So all the Indian viewers, perhaps this is going to be the most interesting conversation with Siddharth Menon, who's the co-founder of WazirX, and with Raoul Pal, who's kind of the CEO of Real Vision and also a macro investor. And Raoul, we have all been seeing your videos since the past year, since the pandemic has happened. You know, you're hugely popular in India. And I think all of the millennials are seeing your videos. So my first question to you is talk about your Indian Connect and why you seem to be so positive about the India, kind of as an emerging market.
So my father's Punjabi from the north, and he grew up in India, moved to England when he was about 18, 19 years old. I lived in India, in Calcutta, when I was a kid. Went to school for a short period of time, about 18 months. And, I go backwards and forwards to see family all the time. I take my wife there, go traveling. I have a huge passion for India. What interested me really about India, I was seeing my cousin, and my cousin runs a branch of a very large American business in India in the mobile phone market. And this was a few years ago. I said, what's going on? India, what's happening? And he said, there's something big going on in the mobile phone market. I said, okay, what's going on? Now, we'd seen that India had the fastest adoption of mobile phones in history. But he said, there's these guys, Reliance Jio, that have kind of done something weird, which is they've taken over the market. I'd also noticed the demonetization of India, the start of Aadhaar, and the UPI system and India Stack. And then when he explained what Reliance were doing, and then I saw what they've done to basically give mobile data to everybody in India. So India now consumes more mobile data than anybody else. I realized that all of these trends were about to come together, which is obviously India is a tech center anyway, has a huge amount of, highly educated engineers and, all sorts of stuff, but you're giving them a platform to develop fintech revolution because you've networked everybody on mobile phones, then you've created a digital system of money, and then crypto's coming on top. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be enormous, what is happening to India, because it's going to, as we know, India's got a bunch of crumbling infrastructure. It's doing a good job updating it all. We've seen almost all the airports are now done. The railroads are getting done, but there's a lot to do. The roads, every time you go to India, there's more and more and more roads being built. But all of that means that the future for India is incredibly bright. And I think it's going to be the powerhouse economy of this decade.
While we are seated here and, doing this conversation, Bitcoin has reached its all-time high, right? So it's like amid this supply chain issues, and all these inflation fears, right? The crypto wave has continued, right? And now Bitcoin is topping up $65,000, which is recording its all-time high. So what are your thoughts, both of you?
Who first? Do you want to go first, Siddharth?
Siddharth.
All right. I think it's a sort of like an inevitable future that we're all been waiting for. There are obviously two major assets, right? That is Bitcoin and Ethereum. When we talk about Bitcoin itself, there is a more of a store of value that we've been all talking about. Now there is a more reason for somebody to have acquired Bitcoin. It's more about fighting against inflation, and that has been the theme, not just previously at a very small retail level. Maybe that was more of a it was a very small market. Now you're seeing the institution also coming on board, and what we can see that is becoming a bigger play, and the whole Bitcoin adoption, even in the India market, that I can see, right? Like what we are seeing is the more institutions coming on since last 2 years, and which was not the case in 2017 and 18. And this is another big thing. And if it is about, the narration is all about correcting against inflation, or hedging against inflation, that by itself is a big narrative. And also on the other hand, you have the whole Ethereum that is also sort of riding the wave, which I believe it's more to do with the adoption that is happening in the dApps, that is decentralized application. And in just last 2-3 years, we have seen a plethora of applications that is coming on top of it, and which has also given more demand to the whole Ethereum network and how that is also growing.
Right. Your thoughts, Raoul?
I think it's the same thing. Is what is going on is network adoption. So we talked a little bit before about how fast mobile phones and mobile data were adopted in India. Actually, the fastest adoption of any technology in all history was the internet. So back in 1997, the internet had 150 million users and was growing at 63% a year. So now in cryptocurrencies, we have about 150 million users, the same, but it's growing at 113% a year. So this is double the speed of adoption of any technology in all human history. And this is where India plays a role, where, Siddharth, what he's managed to achieve with WazirX and others is you've seen massive adoption in India. It's now the third largest country for adoption in the world. And we've only just started. Right. And that's maturing, as we've discussed, into the institutional space. People have realized that this is a bet on the future. It's not only just the store of value bet, which is what everybody first thought it was, but this broadening idea of Ethereum and then cryptocurrencies in general, applications, protocols, NFTs, social tokens. I mean, the whole thing is now kind of gathering, snowballing at an accelerating pace. So really exciting time.
Well, adding on to that, my next question is we all know that kind of there's a difference in the cycle, which was in 2017, 2013 to this one, right? So how do you see the adoption for Bitcoin and Ethereum? I mean, this is 2021 onwards. How do you see that?
So I look at the numbers on this. So if we just extrapolate the current rate of growth and assume it slows down. So as a cycle gets more mature, you slow down the rate of growth over time. So looking at that, we get to 1 billion people by 2024 and 4 billion by 2030. In terms of market cap, I think the whole thing goes from $2 trillion, where we are today, to $200 trillion to be in line with global equities or global bonds. So none of us have ever faced an opportunity where an entire asset class goes up 100x in 10 years. But that's what we've got on our hands. So we will see cycles. There will be bear markets, there will be bull markets, but they'll all be in that nice logarithmic trend of, over time, the adoption causing these markets to rise, which is why it's such an amazing opportunity for all of us.
Right. Yeah. Your thoughts, Siddharth?
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of, agree with what Raoul is saying. The adoption cycle, it's usually, you have the breakout point, and after which there's a mass adoption that is coming. And we have still not reached that tipping point, right? There's still a lot of speculations. There's still a lot of understanding about how government should adopt to it. Many more things around it. Even in the whole the app space that we are talking about, decentralized app space, it's all, a lot of things are being experimented around, right? And some things are kicked off really well, some things are not. And there is always going to be these market cycle, which is very important, which is the one which basically has more corrections. There's a bear cycle where there's the building time when people build onto it, and then there's this whole bull market, which we have seen that in every other market as well. Right? So it's not something that is new to just crypto. So if you look at this, we are just at the beginning of something that's big going to come, and it's just getting started. So looking forward for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, the next question is particularly to Raoul. I think, Raoul, so what are your thoughts on the very recent Pro Shares Bitcoin Equity Fund? This just happened yesterday. So how do you see
right.
this?
So look, it's a step towards adoption, which is creating, because Americans particular, there's a lot of regulation about crypto. Most people are equity investors. That's quite unique to the United States. And so this gives them access without having to learn to set up a wallet or do all the other things that the rest of us have gone through. And that's fine. and it's already seen the largest inflows of any ETF on record in the first day. We know there's a huge demand for this because the investment advisors have not been able to put their clients in products and they've had to find other proxies. The issue is that this is actually a ETF on the Bitcoin futures. Now, Bitcoin futures can trade at a premium or a discount to Bitcoin itself. And we see this with other futures-based ETFs. And that tends to mean that over time they underperform because of the futures curve, the contango that happens. It basically means that the premium ends up costing you money. And you're handing that money to the arbitrageurs, the traders and the hedge funds, who can buy spot Bitcoin and sell the futures contract and capture the difference because it's very attractive to do. So it's kind of suboptimal. It's not really what the space is about. The space is about democratization, giving people the power, but it's a start. We've got to get adoption somewhere. And if we can get regulators to start approving bits and pieces, first was the futures contract, then the ETF on the futures contract, next will be the ETF on spot, then there'll be a new set of regulation about owning cryptocurrencies. It just takes time, but it's a good step.
So the next question is to both of you again. I think it's like, we all know how we are entering the DeFi space, right? And how it's growing rapidly. Now, how do you see DeFi being shaping all these gigantic countries, like India? How do you see that?
My personal view is India is uniquely set up for this because of the integration of the digital currency system that you already have. There will be a there will be a central bank digital currency for India as well. How that integrates with UPI, no idea. But the point being is Indians are now very used to sending money around on their mobile phone instantaneously and making instantaneous payments. And that UPI system allowed people to build fintech layer on top. In fact, that was a stated ambition of the government. So here you are, this incredible decentralized finance that's going to give access, lending and borrowing to hundreds of millions of Indians seamlessly on their mobile phone. That's incredibly powerful. Indians have a propensity to own gold. They always have. It's a historical thing. But the young millennials in India, who are by far the largest population, well, they will see the value in digital money. And if they can get yields on it, they can lend it out, they can stake it. I mean, that's far superior than creating jewelry out of the gold and hoping that maintains its value. So, I think India is pretty uniquely set up for this. Right.
Your thoughts, Siddharth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really agree with what Raoul has to say. But also in a very, when we are talking about India adopting crypto, the whole DeFi market plays a very important role, with the whole techs and everything around that. Primarily because that's an interface for them to be, using other text application or using other, decentralized application. So rather than swapping your token back, getting it back to the exchange, swapping it back, and then doing it, you need these basic infrastructure. So for us, from WazirX point of view, also we are trying to build these things around the whole ecosystem for India, and such that whenever as the adoption happens, these tools are right there, matured enough for them to use. Right. So it goes without saying it's going to be big.
Siddharth, do you think people that these applications are yet kind of user-friendly enough to use? I mean, DeFi is still a bit of a scary world. Even I don't really like it because I don't know, what risk I'm actually taking. How do you think the consumer adoption will be with the kind of UX, UI as it is now?
Absolutely. I think, in 2017, it was horrible. And now it is much better. You have basic swaps that is there. Before it was still an order book. So even if you want to do a swap, you have to place an order and wait for it. But thanks to the whole AMM, protocols, you are easily able to swap between one token to another token. So from a UX point of view, it's just getting better. But still, if you are talking about complex products, right, which uses different protocols, you ultimately need different tokens. And I think I've been just talking to a few more project owners who are trying to solve that, where it becomes more seamless for a consumer when he's probably just interacting with Ether and is able to use maybe multiple protocols in between. So I think we are still early on, and by then we can see more adoption coming in. We should have these tools in place, and good to see now you can directly trade on wallets these days, right? In 2017, you could not even imagine right on your phone. So that by itself is empowering the crypto industry here.
So moving on to my next questions, I think the governments all worldwide are researching for the central bank digital currencies right now. Now, do you think we are headed into the right direction with the central bank digital currencies?
Our role is not to just complain about it.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Yeah.
I interviewed the chief fintech officer for the Monetary Authority of Singapore on Real Vision last week, Supnendu, another Indian. And he's like, it's coming and it's happening, and we are going to use programmable money. And we think there's a lot of benefits for it. And Singapore is actually talking to India about how to create the system and the transfer payments between the two countries. So it's coming. A lot of people fear it because this is not crypto. This is a fiat currency. Look, governments want their taxation and they need a more effective system of money because most countries don't have a high velocity of money. Things get stuck in the banking system. This is going to solve some of that. And it gives governments the ability to integrate fiscal policy and monetary policy together. So they could give wealthy people a certain tax rate and less wealthy people another, but at source. Or you could do it with stimulus checks or whatever it is, right? It gives you the ability to use behavioral economics in fiscal and monetary policy and become more defined, because central banks just cutting rates or printing money is a very blunt tool. So I actually think it's good. Governments obviously will abuse it because that's what governments do. But really what it's doing at a top level, if you stand back and say, what is the macro picture? The macro picture is governments have accepted the blockchain is the future of money. And they want their money to run on the same technology for the advantage they want from it. And therefore, they're going to integrate with this crypto world because they're all part of the same world, which is the digital value layer for the internet. And as long as they get their fair share of taxes, they're going to be fine with it.
Right.
And also, some countries, India has the issue with a slightly closed capital account. So they don't want everybody to take their money offshore immediately. So those are the two issues. Is some countries have a closed capital account, so they want to restrict some of the flow of capital. And the other one is just make sure they get their tax.
Well, your thoughts, Siddharth, on this?
Yeah, I think that is also absolutely right. But also another very important part, right? We are getting into the whole digital era, and this whole thing has started probably 25 years back. We're talking about everything going digital, the information going digital. We're starting writing about, reading things on the online, socializing online. Now, when we are talking about currency, though we had the UPIs and everything in India, though that was still digital, but it's not a digital form. It's still an entry in some database here and there. The tokenization is what is making it more real on the digital space. And again, the other aspect is the programming part of it. But the tokenization part is a step one, and that's the next big medium for when we are talking about the digital space. And it's obvious, it's an inevitable thing that the government would adopt something like this. Government has adopted internet and has become more efficient. This also gives them a more power, and also brings in transparency, security, many other things which is inevitable. That's something that everybody should adopt, and not just India but across the world.
So as Raoul, you just mentioned that everybody is kind of leveraging the digital value layer, right? You're talking about the blockchain. Now, how do you see the government and the public sector leveraging blockchain?
Well, we don't know where this is going, but it feels like it's bigger than any of us imagine. I'm not sure that things like municipalities or parts of government, even the election system, doesn't get tokenized. I think, Indians are used to a digital identity, but that's the first step with Aadhaar. But in the end, there'll be some zero knowledge proof system where we all have a kind of identity token that allows us to do certain things and have multiple identities. I think governments will obviously want some say in that because they own some of your identity. So I think it will over time disrupt both the institutions of banking and central banking and monetary policy, fiscal policy, but also just how government is done. Because blockchain and DAO systems and all sorts of things allow organization of people in a more effective way. We all live in complex adaptive societies, whether that's the country we live in, the religion we belong to, or the societies and communities we live online. They're all now, once you introduce money, they're all basically sovereign states, and some can be small and some can be huge. I think Facebook is going to be the world's biggest sovereign state in terms of numbers, not in terms of value of GDP. But, Facebook's 3.5 billion. You add Facebook DM. Yes, that is pegged to the US dollar, but it's their system of money. You've now got an entire sovereign state. And I don't think people have got their heads around all of this. So I think it's a huge period of change coming. I'm very much a believer in the book, if people haven't read it, called The Fourth Turning by Neil Howe and William Strauss.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which talks about demographics and change. And India, that demographics is more extreme than almost anywhere else. So the change you will get over time is going to be, so the change to government and how government runs is going to be massive.
All right. Your thoughts, Siddharth?
Definitely. I think I just want to simplify these, the bigger picture, right? So even when we are talking about efficiency, what the technology by itself offer, the concept changes. When we thought about internet, it was probably just about saying hi, hello to each other, maybe do a text. But internet has changed the governance and the PSU model completely, how well connected they are, how easy it is to get certain things done. It just brings in a lot more efficiency. Similarly, even with the blockchain adoption or the tokenization that is anyway happening, will affect whether it's buying or selling of land to buying or selling of properties to many things that is happening. Changing of ownership becomes much more easier, transparent, and easy. So by and large, that we will see a wave next probably 10 years where all these institutes within the government will start reimagine themselves into using this technology and how they can benefit from it. And that is already happening, right? So I'm already in touch with a lot of folks who, even at the government level, where they're actually figuring this out. How do they bring the whole registration onto blockchain, and how efficient this can be? And they're trying to figure out challenges around that. And it's just the beginning. And someday, they'll figure everything out, and it's just going to be mass adoption again.
Yeah, just think about the mess that is Indian property title. Right, it's
Absolutely.
Horrific. It's horrific. It needs to be tokenized.
So, right, my last question to Raoul, I think, and to both of you is we have had El Salvador accepting the Bitcoins. Now, which countries do you see the next? And how do you see these countries falling into the league now?
The question is this the right thing to do at this time? Because you're giving people who haven't, on some respects, you're giving people access to something that has a potential very large upside, so as a savings vehicle, but you're giving it to very poor people who probably don't want the volatility of it. I'm not sure it solves their problem. El Salvador, it's not like their currency keeps collapsing. They're pegged to the US dollar. So what are they actually doing there? They're actually making a remittance system. Okay, fine, that's great. But I'm not sure the population is yet able to understand how these investment and savings vehicles work. So I think it's going to take time to educate them properly what it is. So the propensity will be to sell it, or then when it goes down, it's going to be, well, what have you given me? My money's gone down. How did it work? I think we need to be careful. I think integrating Bitcoin as a savings vehicle and investment vehicle democratizes access to these things. And I think that's amazing. But people need to understand what it is they've got. This is not magic money that just makes you rich. This is a risk reward thing that, for half the time makes you feel terrible because it goes down, and then half the time makes you feel like a genius because it goes up like a rocket ship. So, it's going to take time for people to understand this.
Right. Your thoughts, Siddharth?
I think there are two very important thoughts there. One is it's very difficult to manage money, right? Even for a country to even to run a currency, it's very difficult to even regulate currency. What should go up, and most of them adopt US dollars or something around that. Even now, there's a risk of inflation, which might affect different countries there. As a very a logical sense would be to go with a global currency, which is the next big thing. So yes, someday one of the cryptocurrency should or would become a token which will be accepted as currency across multiple countries. However, the choice of which currency it should be is something that I'm even not convinced, right? So from a Bitcoin point of view, it's very deflationary in nature and not something that you would probably peg for your daily expenses or daily, and especially the volatility part, right? So it's still not there yet. It's still being very, too very difficult to say whether this should be the one. But probably this is the biggest experiment we are talking about, right? So there is something to learn from this, and I'm also looking forward to see how this turns around and see how the adoption or how it has an economic impact across the world here, and see how this goes.
Well, on that note, I guess thank you both of you. I think it's been really a fruitful conversation, and I think the entire world looks up to, I think, both of your kind of passion and love for the new innovations. So thank you, Raul, for joining us, and thank you, Siddharth, for joining us. And yeah, I think that's probably going to end my WazirX conversations. Thank you so much.
Everybody. Really enjoyed it.
Same here. Thanks, everybody.